With the release of iOS 14.3, Apple gave users of the iPhones 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max a truly pro feature, the ability to capture ProRAW images. As the name might suggest, ProRAW is Apple's version of the RAW image format, which has been a staple in the world of digital photography for decades now, with DSLRs and mirrorless cameras all being able to shoot in a RAW format. Now, when it comes to the realm of iPhone photography, RAW image capture isn't necessarily a brand new feature, because you could already capture RAW images through the use of third-party camera apps. However, the main differentiating factor with ProRAW on the iPhones 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max is that yes, it still does give you the flexible versatility of traditional RAW, but it also bolsters that with Apple's computational imaging algorithms. Basically, what this means is that you still have the same flexibility and versatility of manipulating your images just like you would with a traditional digital RAW format, except with Apple's ProRAW, you have Apple's imaging pipeline, which gives you better dynamic range, up to 14 stops when shooting in ProRAW, and it also gives you better exposure control, and basically just irons out all of the kinks that you would expect from a smaller camera sensor like the ones we have in our iPhones. This allows the iPhone, a device that fits in your pocket, to take almost as good photos as a DSLR or mirrorless camera, which is no small feat, considering that those cameras have camera sensors that are 10 or 15 times the size of the ones we have in our iPhones, which is pretty insane. In order to enable ProRAW image capture for your iPhone 12 Pro or 12 Pro Max, you have to go into your settings, go down to camera, go into formats, and then toggle on the option for Apple ProRAW. Following this, anytime you open the camera app, all you have to do is look in the top right hand corner for that RAW image capture icon, and you just have to toggle it on and off as you please. When it comes to actually taking photos in ProRAW, all you have to do is make sure that you've got ProRAW turned on in your camera app, point your iPhone at your subject, and just shoot. It's really that easy, and the thing is, you just have to shoot your photos like you normally would. No hassling around, none of that, and it's really that simple because all of the magic happens in the background. But you do have to keep in mind that even though it's really easy to capture a ProRAW image, it's just as easy to fill up your storage if all you do is capture ProRAW images when a normal image would suffice, because a ProRAW image is 8 to 10 times larger in size than a traditional compressed JPEG image, so you have to keep that in mind when you're taking your photos in ProRAW. One of my major gripes with ProRAW is that you can't actually take portrait mode images at the same time as capturing ProRAW, but I do have a workaround for that, and it's actually a little bit better than Apple's own inbuilt portrait mode in the camera app, so keep watching to find out what that is. But before I go on and show you some examples of images I captured in ProRAW, I'd just like to clarify why shooting in ProRAW is preferable at all. The thing is, if you want to massively manipulate your photo after you've taken it, shooting in a very compressed format like JPEG will do you no favors because of the bit depth. Basically, bit depth refers to the amount of colors that a camera sensor can capture and then show you, and the more colors that you can capture, the better your editing experience will be. To give you some perspective when it comes to bit depth regarding colors, an 8-bit image has a possible combination of around 16 million colors, whereas a 10-bit image has a possible combination of around a billion colors, while a 12-bit image has a possible combination of over 68 billion colors. And the ProRAW format on the iPhones 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max capture 12-bit ProRAW images, which gives you a massive amount of manipulation when it comes to your hue, saturation, and luminance. In these examples that I'm about to show you, I took all of these photos at sunset, and the reason I did this was because if you're shooting directly into the sun at sunset, you need a lot of dynamic range to really retain lots of those details in the highlights and the shadows. Along with that, many of my subject-oriented photos that I took in ProRAW are very extremely backlit, meaning that the light source is actually coming from behind the subject, and the subject itself is extremely underexposed. And if ProRAW does its job correctly, I should be able to really retain some of those shadow details when it comes to my subjects who were completely underexposed. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. Alright, so let's get into some photos I took in ProRAW on my iPhone 12 Pro and then edited in Lightroom Mobile on my iPhone and my iPad. So let's get into it. Alright, so the first shot we have here is an ultra-wide landscape of this lake with the sun setting right behind it. And as you can see, it's lacking lots of dynamic range, contrast and color, but that's kind of the point with ProRAW because you're supposed to manipulate the image to your liking. And as you can see, the tree line is kind of in the shadows, as is the lower part of the lake where we have a few of those ducks swimming around. And here is the edited shot. As you can see, I've managed to retain a lot of the details in the highlights and the shadows, and there's also a lot of dynamic range present where the sun is setting behind the lake. And as you can see, the gradients just flow really nice together, and there's a really soft highlight roll-off that is very pleasing to look at. Along with that, you can also see that the ducks, which were almost invisible in the raw shot, are very visible and they're really easy to see. Now, there is obviously a little lack in sharpness, but I can take that over a lack of dynamic range any day. And when it comes to just shooting photos to post on social media or even to keep around for yourself, the ProRAW image capture in this case has done a splendid job. I also took the same image in JPEG and applied a very similar edit just to show you the difference that ProRAW really makes. So as you can see in this JPEG edit, the gradients are much harsher, and there's a lot of artifacting around the tree line as well, where some of the colors in high contrast areas meet, and it's really not a nice look at all. Along with that, the area of the photo where you see the sun setting just looks really harsh and unattractive with those blocky gradients, and the photo overall just isn't really that good if you apply a very similar heavy edit to this JPEG and when compared to that raw image. Basically, when you shoot in JPEG and apply a really heavy edit to the image, some parts of the image just fall off when it comes to color gradients and bits of dynamic range, because there's just less information in a compressed JPEG image to work with when compared to a ProRAW image. So the next photo was one of me leaning on a railing, and it was taken on the wide angle camera on the iPhone 12 Pro, which has an f1.6 aperture, which is kind of evident by the very blurry foreground of the floor. And as you can see in this image, there seems to be really no detail in the sky in terms of color, and I'm actually very underexposed, as you can see here. But once you actually apply the edit, you see this really nice blue gradient in the sky, and you can also see that I'm perfectly exposed now with that really nice golden glow of the sunset on my skin. And the thing is, I was able to retain a lot of the shadow detail in the subject, which is me, thanks to ProRAW and the ability to lift those shadows out of that underexposure. However, there's one thing I don't really like about this edit, and it's that there's a lot of color fringing in high contrast areas, like against my skin and the sky, but I think that's more to do with my really aggressive editing than the actual ProRAW image capture itself. And the truth is, you can't really see that little imperfection unless you're really pixel peeping, and when you're posting something on social media, no one's really pixel peeping in the first place, so you should be fine in that regard. Alright, so this next photo is my absolute favorite of the ProRAW images I captured for this video, and there's a very high chance that you clicked on this video because of that before or after thumbnail that I had for this video. Alright, so this is a portrait of me taken on the telephoto camera on the iPhone 12 Pro, and as you can see, I'm very underexposed. I'm so underexposed in fact that compared to the background, I could basically turn this into a silhouette photo of me by just turning down the shadows, and you can't even see my eyes in this raw photo. That's how underexposed I am. However, all is saved once the edit is applied, and as you can see, I've basically brought back my skin tones from the dead, and there's so much more life in this photo, and the sky also looks stunning with that orange and teal gradient, and I think this photo was a success in showing how versatile ProRAW really is. This photo also speaks volumes about the amount of dynamic range ProRAW is able to retain, because in the raw image you can't even tell that there are clouds in the sky, but in the actual edited image the clouds are fully visible, and even the pattern on my shirt, which was basically a shadowy mess in the raw image, is almost really clear to the eye, which is really nice to see. Now, I definitely could have done a better job of shooting this image, but I tried to make the situation as difficult as possible to see how far I could push ProRAW. However, as a portrait, this photo is missing something, and that's the blurry background, because like I said before, you can't shoot simultaneously in ProRAW and in portrait mode. However, I have an app to fix that, and it's called Focus, spelled F-O-C-O-S, and basically what it allows you to do is apply a blurry background or a portrait mode effect to a non-portrait mode photo, and it works, dare I say, better than Apple's own portrait mode in their camera app. In order to get that blurry background functionality, the app is free, but there is a paid upgrade where you can actually get more features in terms of lighting and different bokeh characteristics in terms of your blurry background, but you just get a blurry background and set the amount of blur. The app is free for that purpose. Because this app actually uses the depth information captured by your iPhone camera, it can actually use that information to then provide a really nice 3D plane of the focus points in your image, which makes it really easy to pinpoint that focus and make sure that you don't get any weird artifacts when it comes to things that are out of focus that should be in focus and vice versa. However, the app did have a little bit of trouble getting my glasses in focus, but you can really easily fix that by brushing those little areas back into focus, which you can't do on the normal camera app on the iPhone. So in many ways, this focus app actually does a better job at portrait mode than portrait mode, which is pretty cool. So at this point, I was sure that I was done. Like honestly, ProRAW had really proved itself to me, but I decided to take it one step further and I took this photo here. So this is a photo of me holding out my AirPods Pro, and it's again backlit with the sunset, and as you can see, basically nothing in the foreground is visible. You can't really see the AirPods, there's really no color to my arm, and yeah, the entire foreground is just pure shadow. But with a quick edit, I was able to get this. And as you can see, it's not the perfect shot, there is a bit of artifacting in high contrast areas, but the fact that I was retained this information at all is amazing for me to see. And yes, there's a lot of issues with this image in terms of artifacting, but the fact that I was able to do this at all just really blows my mind. And it fills me with a lot of confidence in that I can take this phone with me on a trip and not even have to worry about taking my really bulky in comparison camera setup. And yeah, it just shows how versatile ProRAW really is under the right conditions, and even under the most extreme conditions as well. I've actually been thinking of making a video comparing the photos you get from an iPhone shooting in ProRAW compared to my Sony mirrorless camera shooting in RAW, which is actually filming me right now, to see if you guys can actually tell the difference in a normal social media like setting when I show you the photos side by side in a YouTube video, kind of like a little mini game. So tell me if you'd like to see that video in the comments down below, because I'd really love to make it and see how far I can push this camera on my iPhone in compared to a real camera that's filming me right now. Alright, so that's the end of the video. This video took me a lot of time to make, so I'd really appreciate it if you liked this video for the amount of effort I put into it. And yeah, like at the end of the day, I'm not a professional photographer, I'm just a hobbyist. But I think that's really in the spirit of this video, because many people who have the iPhones 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max are not photography professionals, but just normal people who'd like to take their photo game to the next level. And the fact that I can do this with a device that can fit in my pocket is really just insane. If you have any thoughts or questions, make sure to leave them in the comments down below, and make sure to subscribe for more future tech videos. And yeah, thank you for all of those people who've subscribed in the last couple of months. I've gained like literally half of my subscribers just in the last month alone. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. My name's Ramal, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next one.